CBS 11.
Live from Dallas and Fort Worth, this is CBS 11 News Saturday morning. The ones for Texas.
I do not fear what is ahead, for our problems are large, but our heart is larger.
Right now on CBS 11 News at 11, people around the world are remembering the patriarch of a political dynasty. Former President George H.W. Bush passes away at age 94. We take a look back at his life and legacy. Good morning and welcome to CBS 11 News this morning at 11. I'm Jennifer Lindgren. A spokesperson for the Bush family says the 41st president took his last breath at 10:10 last night in Houston. Political reporter Jack Fink joins me now with an in-depth look at the man who meant so much to so many. Thanks for joining us, Jack.
Good morning, Jennifer. Former President George H.W. Bush, 41 as he liked to be called, was a historical figure in so many ways. He was not only a president, but the father of a president, George W. Bush, 43, who was also the former governor of Texas. The elder Bush was also the first sitting vice president to become elected president since Martin Van Buren in 1837. He was well respected and loved by so many.
World events shaped George Herbert Walker Bush's presidency. The Soviet Union collapsed, the Berlin Wall came down, and President Bush led a worldwide coalition and war against Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein.
5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
It was an overwhelming victory. While President Bush had what may be the highest presidential approval rating ever, 89%, it still couldn't guarantee him re-election. In 1992, he lost to then Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton.
I am very grateful to all of you. It's been a wonderful 4 years, and nobody can take that away from any of us. It's been good and strong, and I think we've really contributed something to the country, and maybe history will record it that way. Thank you all very, very much.
Mr. Bush served as vice president under President Reagan for 8 years. He had a strong connection to Texas. In 1984, they accepted the Republican nomination during their convention at the Hotel Anatole in Dallas. Much of Mr. Bush's life was dedicated to public service.
18 years old.
At 18, he fought in World War II and became the youngest Navy pilot. He then graduated Yale University and moved to Texas in 1948. He and wife Barbara settled in Midland, where they started their family. Their oldest son, George W., later became governor of Texas and president himself. Before politics, the elder Bush went into the oil business and struck it rich. He then ran for Congress and won. President Bush ended his political career where he began, in the Lone Star State. He opened his presidential library at Texas A&M.
More important to me is how these records will serve to educate future generations of Americans and give them a broader understanding of how their government responded in the way it did to the challenges it faced.
And then there was President Bush's lighter side. After losing re-election, he welcomed comedian Dana Carvey to the White House. His imitation of Mr. Bush was a popular skit on Saturday Night Live.
To start out with Mr. Rogers, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Then you add a little John Wayne. Here we go, let's go over the ridge. You put them together, you got George Herbert Walker Bush.
Mr. Bush loved skydiving, even did so for his 90th birthday. And after George W. became president, Mr. Bush enjoyed their new nicknames, Bush 41 and 43. Bush Sr. was known for his 1,000 points of light, a call for volunteerism. President Obama awarded him the Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. At the opening of his son's presidential center at SMU in April 2013, the crowd gave 41 a standing ovation, and he in turn stood to salute them.
And we're glad to be here. God bless America, and thank you very much.
Good job.
Too long?
Dad taught me how to be a president. Before that, he showed me how to be a man. And 41, it is awesome that you are here today.
The younger former President Bush wrote a book about his dad, 41, A Portrait of My Father. Mr. Bush was once asked how he'd like to be remembered.
I think if they said he did it with honor.
Though the former president had been hospitalized in recent years, he still made public appearances. At the Super Bowl in Houston, he took part in the coin toss, and he threw out the first pitch during one of the Astros World Series games. A president widely respected and admired well after he left office.
The former president had one heck of a resume. He also served as a CIA director, envoy to China, and a congressman from Houston. His life of public service, though, began after the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. It was on his 18th birthday that he enlisted in the Navy and flew torpedo bombers in the Pacific and was shot down in 1944. His two crewmen did not survive.
Yeah, remarkable life, absolutely.
A brave man.
Yes, definitely. You know, one of the last times we saw him in public, I think, was back in April at his wife's funeral in Houston.
You know, what really struck me was he came out to greet the mourners who came to pay their respects to the former First Lady Barbara Bush, surprising everybody there.
It was a really touching moment.
It was very touching,
yes.
and we interviewed people who actually got to meet him and were stunned that at this moment of grief in his life, he wanted to come and greet them.
And he also maintained a relationship with a lot of former presidents and the people who served after him as well, too.
Oh, he was very close, became very close with his former adversary, former President Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. And even President Obama, I think, out of all the former presidents for Mr. Obama, he was most close to former President George H.W. Bush. Mm-hmm. And he was just at his house just a couple days ago.
Right.
Earlier this week in Houston.
Had a chance to see him.
Yeah, exactly. So it was pretty remarkable to hear that.
Yeah.
But who knew this was going to happen just
a few days later,
right.
exactly. You know, and we also saw him at the 75th anniversary, remembering Pearl Harbor. He was at that event as well. And
his library held an event to commemorate that anniversary. He paid tribute to former Senator and former presidential candidate Bob Dole, as you see there. Mm-hmm. He really didn't speak, but just his presence there, I felt was very interesting. And he also had former survivors of the Pearl Harbor attack there as well. We interviewed them.
And so we expect that there will be a state funeral since he is a former president of the United States. Do we know a little bit about what that entails?
Well, we do know this can take 7 days. Whether it will, we don't know yet. We're waiting for the plans to be released, but we do know that his body will be flown up to Washington, D.C., where it will lie in the Capitol and give people a chance to come pay their respects. Mm-hmm. And then there will be a memorial service and funeral here in Houston before his body is laid to rest at their library in College Station.
Okay, much more to see in the coming days, and of course we'll check back in with you in just a few. Thanks, Jack. In a statement, his oldest son, President George W. Bush, called his father a man of the highest character and the best dad a son or daughter could have asked for. The elder Bush's death comes about 8 months after the passing of his wife, Barbara Bush.
I think he's the wisest, smartest, most decent, caring person I know.
And as Jack mentioned, we are still awaiting details of his funeral arrangements, but we do know Mr. Bush will be buried alongside Barbara and their daughter Robin at his presidential library and museum in College Station. According to the newly launched website, GeorgeHWBush.com, the Bush family is partnering with the Department of Defense to carry out his wishes. Students from the Bush School of Government at Texas A&M University held a candlelight vigil early this morning there. They placed candles around the statue of the former president outside the library and museum that bears his name.
Such a wonderful man, and this school is founded on his style of public service and selfless service. He himself said public service is a noble calling.
Due to his passing, all scheduled events have been canceled at the Bush Library and Museum. Meantime, tributes are pouring in at the George W. Bush Presidential Library in Dallas. This is a live look from the library on the campus of SMU this morning. Mourners have continued to stop by ever since the news broke late last night. They are paying their respects and sharing their thoughts, laying flowers to remember him. All of this for the passing of the 41st president.
First president I ever voted for. 1992, graduated high school, turned 18 years old, was living in Pasadena, California, and so impressed by him. I actually made a trip to Dallas Just after graduating high school, bought myself a ticket, flew out here all by myself because I wanted to see him speak.
Very early this morning, the American flag outside the Bush Center was lowered to half-staff. The Texas flag will also remain lowered at half-staff until sunrise on December 31st. This morning, President Donald Trump called Mr. Bush a truly wonderful man. Tweeting in part, President George H.W. Bush led a long, successful, and beautiful life. Whenever I was with him, I saw his absolute joy for life and true pride in his family. His accomplishments were great from beginning to end. President Obama awarded Mr. Bush the Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, back in 2011. According to a Bush family representative, the two had a visit while Obama was in Houston on Tuesday and, quote, where they rekindled what was already a very warm friendship. Shortly after the news broke, Mr. Obama tweeted in part, America has lost a patriot and humble servant in George Herbert Walker Bush. While our hearts are heavy today, they are also filled with gratitude. 42nd President Bill Clinton among those mourning the loss of his friend and predecessor on Twitter, writing in part, I am grateful for every minute I spent with him and will always hold our friendship as one of my life's greatest gifts. We will have much more on President Bush's life and legacy throughout this newscast. We encourage you to stay with us and at CBSDFW.com, on air and online, for continuing coverage as we remember the former president. Still ahead this morning, a murder charge for a fired Dallas police officer. The grand jury's decision some call justice, while others say is purely political. Plus, the Dallas Holiday Parade is now in full swing this morning. This is a live look from festivities downtown. We'll tell you the road closures you need to know about next. Jeff.
We had a tornado watch last night, tornado warning, and several thunderstorm warnings as well. Those line of thunderstorms have cleared out, and we are a day away from the cold air coming in. Forecast coming up.